This is McFly Angler.
And it starts now.
To start this fly, you will need a hard foam popper head like these large bass pops from Rainey's. You will also want to pair a hook with it. I will show you what hook I'm using in a minute, but you want to have half the hook eye sticking out past the front of the popper like so, and make sure there is still enough room on the back to tie in some materials. Oh, and also enough gap in the hook to get a good hook set. So the hook I will be using today is a Gamakatsu B10S in size 1/0, which is perfect for poppers. It's got a fairly long shank and a deep bend into the hook. Plus it's strong and also a thin wire so it won't weigh the fly down. Place the hook securely in your vise. For thread you will want a thick and strong thread like this Vivus 140, and today I'm using chartreuse. To find out where to start your thread, you will want to find out where the back end of the popper will be. Keep it marked with your fingers. Then start your thread right at that mark. See, that goes back right to where the popper head will end. Now we will build up a thread base for the popper head to grip onto when glued in place. We will want to build a few bulges as well, one near the rear, then come up a bit. To make a flat spot to keep the popper from spinning, let's cut off a piece of heavy mono fishing line and tie it in with X-wraps perpendicular to the hook shank like so. Make some tight wraps in front and in the rear to hold it in tight. Then bring your thread up to about a hook eye length behind the hook eye. Make another bulge there about as wide as the hook eyes. Then wet finish your fly. Cut off the mono so only a small piece is sticking out on both sides. Now we need some glue, and I like using this gel type super glue from Loctite. Squeeze some on the thread all the way down the hook shank, coating a fair amount. Place your fingers at the back end to help keep the foam popper from pushing too deep into the shank. Then, try to go quickly and push the popper head back into the hook shank until it hits your fingers. Wipe off any excess glue and try not to get any too far forward in the popper. You'll see why in a minute. Try to adjust it quickly before the glue sets. Make sure the hook eye is sticking out a little past the foam head and also is not canted. You can see here, you want the hook eye sticking out a bit, but make sure the glue dries before moving on to any other steps. Now let's color the popper head. I like to angle the fly upward to get better access to the front. You can color the flies any way you want, but I will be making a yellow mouth on this using this yellow Sharpie. Honestly, you could have done this to the foam before putting it on the hook. It actually might be easier for the front here. Oh well. Anyway, color up the front how you want, then put it back normal into the vise once again. I'll be making a frog color popper. You can color your poppers any way you want, but here I will show you how I do it. So I'm using a mix of different green and olive colors. I have 2 add markers that are in the colors I'm looking for, but I need a medium green like this Sharpie that I'll be using for a gradient. You will see what I mean later in the video. I also will be using a brown and red Sharpie for dots to look like a frog. Let's use the lightest green first. I like making little triangles on the bottom, so I start with a couple lines around the base of the popper head. Then I make angles to the lines to connect the previous line and make little triangles on the bottom. Again, like I said, be creative and color this however you want. I personally don't have a spray brush type system, so this is how I get gradients on my flies. Anyway, when I'm done with the bottom, then I make a solid line across the bottom 1/3 of the popper from the rear to the front, but try not to get any in the yellow front section of the popper. Okay, let that dry before moving on to the next color. In all honesty, I like making 3 to 4 of these flies because once I do one color on all 4, then the first one is dry enough to start with the next color. Anyway, that's the medium green Sharpie. I do the same thing with the lines and connecting them. This forms a jagged gradient like so. Of course, fill in another 1/3 of the way up the popper head and do the same jagged line on the other side as well. Oops, I got some of the green in the front portion of the yellow. See, try to avoid that, it looks bad. By the way, also see where the glue got on the popper foam there? I cannot color over it, so try to keep it just at the rear or it will make a blotchy looking popper head. Okay, while the medium green is drying, I will make a yellow lip. And might as well take this time to make some darker dots on the bottom with the medium green Sharpie. Let's also make some chartreuse dots and yellow dots as well. Again, color this how you want. I think these dots represent a frog quite well, but that's just me. Let me know in the comment section how you would color a frog popper. Now that the medium green is dry, let's use the olive for the back. Do the same jagged lines onto the medium green, and then cover the whole back with the darker olive. I will also make dots with the olive into the medium green section to give it a froggy look. I will use the brown Sharpie to make some dots as well, and the red Sharpie. Alright, I'm done with the dots now. Let's go ahead and dry this overnight before putting on the resin. Before putting the resin on, it's good to use some heavy lead-free wire to keep the hook eye clear from resin. Let's first coat the front of the popper with resin. Angle it up in the vise once again. We will need a disposable paintbrush and some type of cup. We will need to scrape off some of the excess resin on the edge, so use a cup that you can throw away. The resin I will be using is Solarez Flex formula. You need to make sure whatever coating you are using that it doesn't cure hard, but has some flex to it. See, when a bass bites the popper, the foam will compress and the hard resin will crack. This flex stuff works great though. Squeeze some onto the top of the head there and then paint on it, coating the entire head with the thin layer. Then turn it upside down so the wire hangs forward, and then cure it with your UV light. Untwist the wire and remove from the hook eye. Now there will always be a little bit of goop up by the hook eye, so use tweezers and your bodkin to remove any bits blocking the hook eye. As you can see, you do want the eye of the hook free from any debris. Now we need some eyes. You will want the flat stick-on eyes like these. I am using the 1/4 inch for this fly. Place down a dot of gel superglue and place the eyes on. Try to get them even on both sides. Then let this dry for a few minutes before moving on to the next step. Okay, now we will coat the entire body with the flex resin. Squeeze some all over. You want a fair amount, but don't go overboard. It might take you a couple poppers to know how much. Anyway, once you get some on the popper head, then use a brush to even out the resin. You want to make sure that the entire body is coated evenly. I like to also brush circular around the head as well to make an even coat. Just keep brushing until the entire body is perfectly coated evenly. Then spin the fly many times until the resin has smoothed out. And once it's smooth, then you can cure it with your UV light. So this first coat looks good, but to really make sure it comes out fully smooth, you will want a second coat of resin. You don't need as much resin on the second coat since it won't be soaking into the foam this time. Just make sure that it's evenly coated and spin it again to fully even it out before curing the last time. And there we go, it's smooth without any foam pieces sticking through. This will keep the water from soaking into the foam as well and keep it buoyant throughout many fish strikes. Okay, now let's tie in the tail. Start your thread right behind the popper head. By the way, you can tie this with whatever style tail you want. Today I'm going to use a few feathers to look like frog legs coming out of the back. This whiting American rooster cape dyed olive will work great for this. The tips are rounded, which is what I'm looking for. Pull off 2 small feathers, 2 medium feathers, and 2 large feathers like so. Align the tips of the large feathers and make sure they are splayed outward. Measure them to your desired length. In this case I'm tying 2 times the hook shank length. Then strip off the fiber from the base at that measurement and cut off the stem to leave a small tie-in point. Tie the feathers in directly on top of the hook shank so they splay outward. Now because I had them slightly off center of the top, the feathers angled funky. So back off the thread and retie if this happens to you. Now I'm measuring out 2 of the medium-sized feathers to slightly shorter than the larger feathers. Prepare them in the same way, but this time tie them in one at a time. You want to tie them in slightly on the side of the hook shank so they don't turn too much. If they are directly on top, they will turn sideways on you, and you want them angling upward like so. Okay, now I'm preparing the shorter feathers in the same way, measuring them out to about half the length of the longer feathers. Tie them in so they splay out sideways like the larger feathers did, which means they need to be tied on top of the hook shank. Nope, that's not it. Let's try that again. Okay, that's better. Clean up that section with some wraps. Now I'm going to tie in a soft hackle feather collar to transition the tail feathers to the popper head. I'm looking for one with longer fibers and lots of webby marabou looking feathers on the stem. Pull off some of the web fibers deep into the bend, then pinch the tip of the feather and stroke the fibers rearward, leaving a small tie-in portion. Clip that off square and tie it in. Now grab the stem with hackle pliers and proceed to wrap the feather around the hook shank, stroking the fibers rearward. Capture the stem with your thread and then cut off the waist. Now I'm going to tie in some rubber legs. I have this spotted chartreuse silicone skirt for bass jigs that will work perfectly. Cut off 2 strands. Tie these in on top of the fly with the rear of the strands extending out slightly longer than the front. Then pull the rear strands out sideways and tie them in like so. Then pull the forward-facing strands rearward and on the side of the hook and tie those down as well. For a stiff collar, I like using one more of the medium-sized American saddle hackle feathers. Pluck off all the fibers off the non-bendy section of the stem, and then tie the feather in behind the popper head. Once tied in really well, then clip off the waist. Grab the tip of the hackle with some hackle pliers and proceed to wrap the feather around the hook, pulling all the fibers rearward with every wrap, and this will form a collar. Capture the feather and trim off the waist. To whip finish, it's best to do this by hand if you know how, but a large whip finish tool can be used if you need so. I like doing 2 whip finishes, then applying some super glue with a bodkin around the whip finish to keep it secure. By the way, I'm sorry for this blown out footage. I had the shutter too fast and it made it just too bright. Okay, there we go. That is better. And there we have it, the finished popper. I personally think I tied the tail a little bit too long here, so you can shorten it if you choose to. But that is basically how I tie my large bass poppers. Let me know in the comments section what you thought of this coloration, and also what colors you like fishing with for bass. As you all know, I've gotten you all discounts from www.resinfly.com. They manufacture all their own hooks, rods, reels, fly tying tools, and other gear for fly fishing. Not only are the prices at their shop very good already, but like I said, they're offering you 15% off of your first order with them. So go to www.resinfly.com and type in McFly at checkout for a discount on your entire cart. I want to also thank all of my patrons who support me. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support this channel, and also get some great perks like early access to my videos, participate in live streams, and even discounts on purchasing flies I tie and sell. Yes, that's right, I do sell flies hand-tied by me. If you want to order, you can do so through Patreon for that discount, or just place an order by finding me on Instagram or Facebook. Or if you don't use social media, then you can go to my YouTube homepage, click the About section, and then click View Email Address, and email me with your order. I want to also thank all of you who share all my videos and your continued support by hitting the like button and being my subscriber. Thank you for making these videos possible. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.